You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 103. This podcast is dedicated to CIRCUS. It's a place for professionals in the industry to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get a sneak peek into this world. Hey friends, fans, and foes. I'm Shannon McKenna. I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. I did something this week that I almost never do. I went on to Libsyn.com, and Libsyn is my host, my server. So audio files take up a lot of space, and I don't want to host them on my own website. So I host them on Libsyn. Libsyn didn't give me any money for saying their name so many times. By the way, I actually pay them quite a bit in hosting fees every month, but there we are. The point is, not only does Libsyn store all the podcast episodes, it also gives me a bunch of information, like how many times the podcast has been downloaded, where in the world you guys are listening from, what's up all over the world. It's so cool to look at. But the thing that I was looking at that I think is really amazing is every week, obviously on Mondays, there's a huge spike in downloads. About 500 people are subscribed and download this podcast every Monday. And then it kind of keeps going throughout the week. People listen and download at different times. But what I think is so cool about that is patreon.com/theartistathlete, which is how this podcast is funded, has about 200 Patreons on it. 187, I think we're at, to be exact. So if 13 more people want to sign up, we'd be at 200. But that's almost half of all the original downloads that I see on a Monday. And so to have that kind of participation, to have that kind of interest, to have that kind of support, I think is really, really amazing. And I'm super thankful for it. If you want to be one of those 13 people to get me to 200 Patreons, that would be so cool. I'm still hoping to get to that big number of $1,000 a month so that I can start producing Artist Athlete Podcast t-shirts. Go to patreon.com/theartistathlete. There's a whole bunch of cool behind the scenes, never before broadcasted interviews, all sorts of stuff that you can get there, as well as get your own Artist Athlete Podcast sticker if you pledge $8 a month or more. Patreon.com/theartistathlete is the place to go. Sign up today. My guest today is Krin Haglund. Krin Haglund is a Montreal-based circus performer, actress, and director. In addition to her role as Miss Martell on the TV series Big Top Academy from Hulu, Discovery Kids, and Sony UK, and Big Top Academy Schools Out Edition, Haglund has performed around the world with many of today's most exciting circus companies, including The Seven Fingers, Cirque du Soleil, and Cirque Éloise in the show Rain, where she was the first woman to perform on Cyr Wheel, which is that big circle wheel that people stand in and spin around in. Okay, you guys all know that. Cool. Haglund is the founder and artistic director of the not-profit circus company The Radiant. With The Radiant, she has produced 3 original circus shows, including her one-woman show, The Rendezvous. As a director and concepteur, Haglund works to create world-class circus that explores the intersection of character, comedy, and acrobatics. She coached Cyr Wheel for the Seven Fingers off-Broadway hit Traces, and was the director or artistic advisor for award-winning circus acts, including an act that won silver medal at Festival Cirque du Soleil. Krin was so kind to be on this show, and we had an amazing interview, and then I had a terrible microphone, and that interview got totally corrupted. So she was even kinder to come back again, which is why at the beginning of this episode, I say this is round 2, or I make some joke about that. That's what I'm referencing. You'll hear it right now. Here's my interview with Krin Haglund. Round two. Yes. Thank you, Krin Haglund. Welcome back to the Artist Athlete Podcast, is what I should say.
Thank you so much, Shannon. It is such a pleasure to talk to you again. And it was a joy to speak with you last time. And it's lovely just to chat with you again. I really enjoy. I look forward to meeting you in person when things are better.
Yes. Someday it will happen. Okay. So it's so weird. I feel like it's Groundhog Day to do this, but okay. So tell the people again who you are and what you do.
Okay. Hey, people. My name is Krin Haglund. I am a multidisciplinary circus artist, director, and actress. I am a professional kind of goofball character. I've made my career being very much myself, which is something that I think we could talk about a bit more, Shannon.
Yes.
So I work as a circus director. I work as an actress in TV and film, and I also work now as a MC and host of circus events. So that's kind of where I am these days, but I have had a trajectory of a big love of circus from when I was really little that took me kind of on a circuitous path through San Francisco and then Cirque Seven Fingers, Cirque du Soleil, and then into making my own work, which was a very interesting process. So that's my bio in short. And I'm the first woman to do Cyr Wheel, which I did with Cirque Rain, and also part of the first duo. And so I coach mostly. I mostly do act direction now, but that is the one circus discipline that I still coach specifically, which is Cyr Wheel. So there we go.
Amazing. Nice. So you came up, as many people who have been on this podcast did, in the San Francisco area in that magical time. What made you make the leap to Montreal?
Right. I had been training at the San Francisco Circus Center, which at that point was just a la carte classes, but with very good coaches. Mr. Louis, my dear friend Amy Hancock was my first trapeze coach. Aidan O'Shea was there at that point. So really, really good coaches. So I had been taking these classes a la carte. I had this amazing epiphany when I realized after an aerial act that I got a laugh after I finished a tissue act, and I kind of just played the diva, and it was sort of that self-awareness that was like, oh my goodness, what is this? And so I did the clown program in San Francisco. And then around that time, I also did 2 years with the New Pickle Circus. And the second year of that show was directed by Gypsy and Shayna. So Gypsy Snyder and Shayna Carroll from the Seven Fingers. So they really came home to direct the New Pickle Circus with a really incredible cast of artists. Many of us are still working, which is pretty amazing. And so it was kind of all these things happened around the same time within a few years. So I had seen Cirque Éloise's, the show called Eccentricus when I was still in college. So I was in my senior year of college in Northampton, Massachusetts at a school called Smith. And I saw it and I was just like, I was absolutely distracted. And I was like, that is what I want to do with my life. And interestingly, that was when Danielle Cyr, so in that show, it was like he really evolved the Cyr Wheel, I think during that show time, because it ran for a long time. And so he could do cartwheels in the Cyr Wheel, but I think at that point he hadn't figured out yet how to put the PVC on. We'd have to ask Danielle, but I think so he did cartwheels with the Cyr Wheel, which was, it was a bit captivating for me, but I also just loved the comedy and everything of that show. And so then when I went to San Francisco, I started to just really try to see absolutely everything that I could. And Nomad, which was directed by Daniele Finzi-Posca, but it was a Cirque Éloise show, came to Berkeley. And I saw it, and it was just like, that is what I want to do. I'd had similar experiences as a high school student seeing Cirque du Soleil, but then when I saw Nomad, which was just, it was a circus show that had so much humanity and humor. And, yes. I really loved the emotional journey that I went on watching that show, way up in the cheap seats. It absolutely changed my life. And so I think it was really that show that was like, okay, I want to try to do this. And so, during my time in San Francisco, I had gone from having a full-time job. Like I really thought of circus as I thought that circus was going to, I was like 20, 21, 22 years old and I was like giving up. I was like, oh, circus is going to be my hobby. It's going to be the thing that'll make me happy.
What did you do for your full-time job?
I worked at a PR firm. So I have a degree in Japanese, and I ended up doing like writing. Japanese translation. Yeah, super not very useful in circus, unfortunately. But yeah, so I had this day job, and then I did circus at night, and then I ended up going, it started out as just like on the weekends, and then it was 2 days a week and 3 and 4, and then I went 3/4 time at my job. Then I went half time, and then I basically was a consultant, just doing hourly work until really I came to Montreal, because just San Francisco, you really got to hustle, and I just couldn't.
You have to, yeah.
Yeah, I just couldn't afford to pay my life with circus. And so once I came to Montreal, the cost of living was less. It's a city a lot more friendly to artists. And then by then I was in full-time rehearsals with Elwaz. So I got, and then I went with the Seven Fingers to Paris, to the Festival Cirque de Demain, as the babysitter for Gypsy and Pat's daughter. And, I just kind of went along after we finished this pickle run. They were performing. I went to help. And it was a really great experience. It was kind of like that, sort of the internship where you just get to see people and meet people,
sure,
see how the whole thing works. But in that same time, so I had met recruiters for Cirque du Soleil during the new Pickle Circus show, which was called Circumstance. And then I met Daniele at backstage at the Cirque d'Hiver in Paris. And it was just like, oh, wow. And so I ended up, submitting my videos to everybody. So I had an audition for Cirque Elwaz and one for Cirque du Soleil. And I went through the cast. I got cast in Rain, and there you go. So that's a long answer.
Yeah, no. And then you were in. I love it. And I want to just paint, because I've wanted to have Daniele Finzi-Pasca on the show. He's like one of my, like, those elusive reach guests that you're like not even sure how it could happen, but I just want it. And I, just to paint a picture for all y'all out there, a question that I want to ask him is, how do you direct beauty so well? Because I feel like that's what his shows are. They're just like humane and earthy and beautiful.
Yeah.
And surreal at the same time. Like, I just, I want to paint that picture for people to kind of help understand the impact they had. And Rain was very much in that course as well.
Absolutely. I think one of the concepts that really has always stuck with me so much from working with Daniele is the importance of fragility. And, you hear about it in clowning, but Daniele's really internalized that in his process of how he talks to artists and how he creates. And it's really just like understanding. And also, this is something that has really stayed with me, is just also the beauty in imperfection. Not trying to make everything, like, just to let that, we all, like, nothing's perfect. We're all messing up all the time in our lives. Like, we're all just trying so hard, everybody. And so, and your audience is also struggling. They make mistakes. They have problems. And just to find really ways to make with the choices that you make on stage, just to allow those, that humanity, those mistakes, those small little moments, those glances, to live is really important. And I think for me, that's one of the tenets of his beauty for me, is that, like, he fully embraces the fragility of, just life, and of the process of being in front of all those people on stage. But what, the other thing, Shannon, he's got an incredible team. Daniele is an incredible artist. He is a gorgeous man. And he also has a really beautiful team of people that he's worked with for years and years. And, it's, I feel like they're a well-oiled machine at this point. Like Maria and Hugo and so many others on his team who they can just create the most incredible, lights and music and storytelling. So, I think that's also really wonderful, because they've got, and just like, the costumes and everything, that there's a nice complicity with a whole team of people.
I want to ask you about the cast of Rain. I remember in the Lost interview, the original interview, you talking about the cast, and you said something really interesting about how none of you all were like the best of the best.
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, I mean, and Krzysztof Sorosinski, who is the head coach at Elwaz and is a really beautiful man, he, I think they talked about it. It was pretty, it was not, it's an open secret that none of us were the best acrobats. I mean, none of us were the best, but they hired good performers. So what they said they wanted for this show was they hired good performers who could be taught. So we were all, I mean, everybody in the cast, and to different degrees, I think everybody at the cast is pretty extraordinary at something. So there was so much talent there. But in terms of what they saw with us is like we were all really good performers, and then they invested in us to make these group acts. We all had, connection and acting chops, and we, all had different levels of musical ability. And so with this really intensive rehearsal process that we had, which was about 3 months. So it went, I'd say, yes, I think with 4 months. Basically, I had 3 months to learn how to do Sear Wheel. So it was pretty fast, but they trained us up. And, that's this incredible, so they didn't expect us to be the best by the time the show opened, but they knew that we would be able to carry the show. And there was a lot of trust there. But, for sure, if you think about it now, like only training Sear Wheel 4 months before you perform, it sounds kind of incredible to people. But that's what we did. And, we all learned new disciplines. We all, I had never, pushed planche before. I don't have the morphology to fly on the planche. I'm tall. I'm, a tall, I have a very long torso. Yeah. It's not the right thing for my body, but it was fun to, push planche and catch people off the teeter board. And I learned, so for me personally, I learned wire for that show. And it really was an incredible experience to just really focus and learn to walk high wire in a really concentrated period of time. And then, and Sear Wheel, and also Sear Wheel duo. So it was, it's just, Daniele has a really...
It's so unheard of and so different from like the casting processes that go on today, where it's just so competitive and they want the best of the best and they want them super refined and almost like plug and play ready to go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
that's how it feels sometimes.
It's a different, it's a different world, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, the thing is, like, but you also need to have the hand and the outside eye to help make sure that the theatricality of the imperfection works. And I think that, the thing is, I find that's the most charming. Like, I think I told you in the last podcast, Shannon, that I just find perfection in shows boring. And sometimes I feel like people train the life out of themselves and they train the life out of their acts, and they keep, they're so, when they're practicing their technique, they forget about performance and they forget about connection and they forget about breath and they forget about the fact that the audience actually doesn't need to see every one of your tricks, right? So we need a lot less than we think to tell an emotional story in circus. Like, I fully believe in the dramaturgy of acrobatics, but you don't need, like, the minute that you're showing every single trick that you can do to your audience, you've lost them. And you're like, oh, this is a recital. It's not a piece.
Yeah, totally. And I know a lot of people out there will be very relieved to hear that. I'm interested to know, because you are a director and you work with a lot of up and coming and established performers, how or what do you do with or to them to kind of help them get out of that perfected mindset?
Yeah, it's so hard.
Yeah, I can imagine, because like in technical training, it's like you're trained to kind of like refine and fine tune and perfect because the margins of error for tricks get so razor thin, to then like let all that go, which is necessary. I can imagine it's really hard.
It's interesting. It's always it requires a real level of trust, and I find that I'm having to reiterate it quite a lot with my artists. But one of the things that I find is that this is like when I'm sort of stepping back. So less when I'm actually in show or act creation, but when I'm just working with people kind of on earlier stage coaching sessions, and this may be interesting for your listeners who are training. I find that so often when we're training, we get in our bubble, right? We're just like, you do it again, or some trick doesn't work, and you're like, oh, okay, that didn't work, and you kind of go through these things ad nauseum, and you're repeating. But you're never practicing your actual performance skills on a regular basis. And so I think that there's this thing of like kind of off on the other side of the rainbow when everything's perfect and I'm this professional performer, I'm going to perform then. And I think that that's one of the biggest mistakes that people can make when they're training, especially if they really want to become a performer. It's another thing if you want to just become an athlete, right? This is, the crux of your podcast, which I think is so genius. But when you want to actually tell stories, you have to train that on a regular basis. And it's just as important as your tricks. And so one of the things that I do is like, I'm always telling my students to take, when they run their acts, you run it as if you're in front of an audience, right? You at least, you make that mental break between training and performing when you run. And the good thing with that is like, and the biggest trick that I tell people is to actually just treat everyone else. I mean, now in COVID times, most people aren't training with many others, but when you run your piece, you need to be very greedy for the eyes of everyone else who's in your training space or imagined or outside the window, whatever.
Yes, I love this so much. I remember you saying this, and it has changed the way like I run sequences now.
I'm so glad. But have you noticed when you catch eyeballs? Oh,
yes. And I love it. Before I was kind of like ashamed or embarrassed of it, or I wanted to explain that it's like, oh no, I'm just running this, like it's not finished yet. It's not good enough yet. Like I know you're looking at it, but it's not. But now I'm like, yes, I won a set of eyeballs today. Okay. I got a compliment. Okay.
But that's it. So basically so just to reiterate, what I tell people is, so when they're running, they want to be very greedy for the eyeballs. And anytime that you can distract someone else in your training space or outside or wherever they are, someone else from what they're supposed to be doing. And if they're watching you, that means that you're fully engaged and you're winning, right? Like you're invested in your process, your creation, your performance. And so every little time that someone just glances up from their stretching or from whatever, and they notice you and the joy or the story or the focus or whatever in your piece, then you're winning, right? So it's that being like really greedy for eyeballs, I think is a really good thing to train on a regular basis for all of us. And to just, it also just gives us a break to listen and pay attention to what happens when we do those runs. So just to have them be very specific, because you're also like within those people who've studied clowning will know the importance of happy accidents, right? So you learn so much when things don't go well. And you have to really pay attention to those because they give you a ton of information, but they also are huge gifts, right? They're like these things, these jokes, these little things that you can learn so much from. So every time that happens, when you're in that mode, I make my students actually respond as if they were performing to the thing that happened, whatever that thing is. Maybe it's, I do a lot of work with aerial clowning, which is like one of my total passions. Even though I'm not working as an aerialist these days, I love teaching and directing aerial clowning, which we can maybe talk about in a little bit. But one of the exercises I have my students do is, separating the tissue. Maybe the tissue's just not separating quickly. It's like, which we all know, right? We're like, oh my God.
I have been in front of 3,000 people and had that happen. Yes.
My workshop, and I will make you do an exercise where you have to separate the tissue over and over again. And anyway, but this is an example, right? Where you're like, okay, this is happening. This is happening to me in training. And now suddenly I'm running my act and this happens. How do I deal with it? Breath. You still have to maintain your connection with your public. You have to show your public that you're safe, but you're dealing with your problem, and then you can go back into it. So I do I have, kind of these various steps within the different ways that I teach that I think bring these skills to just understanding importance of performance and connection throughout. So the people who, like I taught for my Flying Funny workshop for 4 years at the Irish Aerial Dance Festival, which is a fantastic, fantastic training festival, which is what makes it really unique, is that it's like a great place to go and learn. By the end of the 4th year, it was like we had a troupe.
Yes.
And everybody was like in my advanced class. They were just like, we just like hit the ground running, and we're making like incredible work with artists who'd been working with me for 4 years. It was pretty incredible. But, they all kind of spoke the same language and understood how to deal with these problems in ways to harness them really for laughs. Now, not that laughs aren't appropriate for everyone, but you still need to deal with problems. And it's a great way to make real human connection, right? Because again, as I was saying, your public, they have problems too. So like seeing you deal with them in circus is a really nice way to make a real connection. And then to kind of ask, so with professional artists, those who I've worked with for a long time, I find it easier. And then people who are newer to working with me, particularly if they come in with a really high level of skill, I think it's always just a little bit of, it's like really digesting that. I think, again, I do think that people choose to work with me because I can help them be more funny and more human and more connected. I'm not, maybe not the choreographer you would choose if you didn't want that. I'll definitely.
No, if you want to do like a, like the classic Montreal, like if you want to do an act that's like black and white and the music is static and you want to writhe on the floor, like, I don't know if Krin Haglund, maybe.
No, don't
I don't think that's you.
You're a director. But like if you want to,
which is good to know, yeah.
But sure. It's but if you want to be funny or connected and still show and use your technique to share a story, then I'm your girl. But it's like, yeah. So I think it just takes a little time to develop that particular, and it's hard. I mean, it's really hard for very skilled performers to let go of being the need to be really good at everything. And, and I think the hard thing with creation is when you're building, I mean, you're not getting that feedback from the public because they will support these decisions because people just love seeing someone who's really good at something, but maybe also not so good at something else, but they're trying their best at this other thing that they're not good at. And so you don't care. You don't need to see people do the most incredible thing all the time. That's exhausting. Like we don't wait, like, oh my God, you're just so tired of seeing like perfect all the time. It's not the Olympics, so it's like you want to just see people do the very best, ridiculous, weird decisions that they're making, whatever it is, the hardest ways to solve a problem is another thing we talk a lot about in clowning. But whatever it is that we're doing in circus, you want to see people just do it the best that they can. And then that's enough. Like that alone is interesting.
Yeah. You mentioned a little earlier, and I want to kind of you have such a cool personal story, and I wanted to kind of go back to that because you said what you specialize in or do best in circus, or what's gotten you the farthest is being yourself. You're very good at being yourself. What does that mean for Krin Haglund? How have you realized that in different ways? And I'm kind of leading the witness right now because
Yes, I hope that I am listening well to my lawyer and being properly led. So for me, I'd say it's a couple of things, but definitely the big lesson that helped me internalize this throughout my work in different ways was the fact that I have alopecia. And so I have had patchy hair loss, like patchy to complete hair loss since I was 15. And, at certain points in my life, it was harder than others, but I've definitely benefited from the fact that I was already, a modern dancer as a teenager. I've always been more on the bohemian side anyway. And so I've kind of been like, okay, being a bald woman is something that, I definitely, it's not been fun, but it's not also been the hardest thing. I'm not sick. I just don't have hair. Right. So,
which is amazing that I imagine that's a statement you actually have to make to people quite a bit.
Yeah.
I'm not sick.
Yeah.
I just don't have hair. It's
right.
Good
because when you see
too.
exactly. And it's also important, as part of, this is kind of a more specific conversation about just how I've manifest. Like sometimes I wear wigs, sometimes I wear hair, and sometimes I wear wigs, sometimes I wear hats. For a while I was wearing scarves, but it's important that you project an image of health because the world does treat you differently. And that was an interesting thing of seeing how when people think you're sick, the way that they treat you. It's a really just important lesson also for, on stage, how people do make judgments with what they see and how we as artists can manipulate that. But that's kind of another question, and I'll get back.
No, go for it. Yeah, love that.
But that's a really important thing that we all need to do all the time as artists. But so I started doing a wig juggling act when I was in San Francisco, and it was so cathartic for me at the early stages where I would, because I had this job in PR at the daytime and I was training circus at night and I had these big circus dreams. But at that point, I still thought that circus was only going to be something that would be a hobby for me and would never be my job, which, again, I absolutely, I think that's so funny now. But
it's the experience of a lot of people, though. A lot of people think this. Yeah.
Yeah, so many. And it like, so I built this act, which, talk about circus therapy, right? Like I was wearing wigs, the wigs were itchy, they're super uncomfortable. So I built this act where I juggled wigs and then the wig would land on my head and I would assume the character of that wig. And then this act, I started to perform it in San Francisco at like little cabarets and little shows and stuff. And then I kept kind of refining it and changing it. And then Gypsy redirected it for the new Pickle Circus show, Circumstance. And I did it in that show. And then I used it to audition for Rain. And then that piece, Daniele loved it and put it in Rain in a slightly modified version. So it was we set it up as this, but he, as a really incredible moment in the show where I had been antagonizing another one of the artists, kind of in this like diva ballerina style thing, which is something one of my kind of go-to clown character things. And so I was, we were on point doing this like little ballet moment. And then she's just like, and she just rips my wig off.
Yes.
And I would walk forward, the scrim just behind me. So the front screen came down right behind me, really isolating me from the rest of the cast. And in this incredible moment with the public. And it was just this like wonderful learning experience for me every single time. The hundreds and hundreds of shows I did with that, just like every time I learned something new, it like people would applaud. Sometimes they would laugh. They would, so they would be different shades of uncomfortable, but also just delighted to see something surprising. And so then the other artist brought me these wigs and I juggled them. And it was just a really sweet moment. And, it's something that I had the pleasure to do over and over again every night. And it really, it was this circus act that I had created that really used my own uniqueness, right? My own, this like problem of having no hair, but I used it. It was very real and emotional. And it was meaningful to me it was meaningful to me when I did it. And it was meaningful to me, but, after I'd done it 400 times. And so that was, this kind of huge lesson of being like, okay, this works for me.
I have to ask, if people aren't lucky enough to have alopecia,
I don't think anybody's ever said that, but
I know I had to. How do you bring out what is the because I'm trying to think about okay, I'm 5'3", I'm kind of muscular, I'm blonde, what are the how do you help other people kind of find those things about themselves or bring out?
Yes, that's why you have to have problems, Shannon.
Oh, yeah, I don't have any problems.
People with no problems are super boring.
It's true.
And Shannon, I'm sure that you could have problems. Like the nice thing about training this stuff and like what I was saying about how you train, what I was saying earlier, like to train yourself to listen to the happy accidents, that's like a micro scale of the work that I really love doing in creation, which is like finding out what's interesting about, what are the things that make the performer unique and different? And then like, what kind of problems do they have? And the problems have to be believable, right? Like if you're a super handsome, super talented white dude, you're going to have to, like, if you look like you have no problems, you're not going to be funny, at least not to me. But we all have psychological problems, right? Like we all have like different, this is where you can kind of get really creative and like you can find different problems. Like suddenly, one of the acts that I do a lot of when I'm creating clown work, I work mostly, particularly when I'm working with newer clown students, I work in directed improv. So I give people concepts that are that I find funny. I kind of and I have them improvise around those concepts. So for example, with somebody like that, I would be like, okay, you're going to have I would give them a problem of like not wanting to touch the floor, or maybe thinking that the tissue is a Jackie Chan movie and you need to be a stunt artist using the tissue. Like I would sort of hand someone a problem and let them improvise around it. And then you learn to listen to the things that work. You learn to listen to the problems. You learn to, kind of sink into that level of performance where you're aware of what your public is seeing at the same time. So you just have to train it like a muscle that you do with your training, and so that you can start to listen to this kind of work and go deeper into it if it is interesting to you. So I find it is, even if you don't look like you have problems, you've got problems. Everybody has problems.
And that's the title of this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody has problems.
And problems are interesting. So there you go.
I love that. Well, that's what drama is, right? Or, like it's a person and a conflict.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like, oh my gosh, like right now we all have problems. Like I can't wait to see these, like I'm just like desperate to see please somebody send them to me. But like, for example, like a group act. How does someone do a group act alone? Right? Like that's a great circus/clown problem. Like here, I give it to the audience. Like somebody like right there. Like, so, if I was doing a group clown class right now, I'd be like, what a perfect pandemic problem, right? Like how do we, and it's such a problem that we're all like trying to figure out how to have community alone or distant from our people. And like for me, that's the kind of thing that I would find. I think that pretty easily we could create something really real and juste, as they say in French, or like really connected and poetic while using your circus skills, right? Like that would be something that I would be curious. So that's kind of the way to, the mining of your own problems. Like you can pay attention in your own work and your own training and just see kind of what keeps happening. But it does help to have an outside eye of, just because it's so easy to miss those things. Like we all miss, the connections. And I find it's, when you have people watch your work, I find that it's very useful to ask like, hey, what did you feel? Or, rather than asking people what they think, just kind of as a way to get at those problems, those kind of, that you can mine for being more yourself. And another, and the other thing is also just like, if it is, I think just generally going with things that delight you, like the things that you love, are always going to just generate more interesting circus stuff. Like, I mean, just an example of like music. If you really, really love it, you're going to do a better job with that piece. So I think just like, trusting yourself with, the quirky things that you love most.
Yes.
You'll that's a good way to go.
Amazing. I want to kind of, talk about, because we didn't get to this last time. I don't know why I keep referencing that last interview when only Patreons have heard it, but your film career.
Ooh,
Because that is, I think, a great interest for, especially in these times where so many entertainers want to diversify not only like their skill set, but where they're entertaining or where they're performing. So how did TV and film, and what are you doing? How did that happen?
Yeah.
What is it?
So I I definitely, I mean, I am a trained circus artist. I am not a trained actor. And so I don't have, I mean, like in terms of the hubris that's going on here, that's not, I don't feel like this is something that I have settled into necessarily, but I have learned a ton. And so I had this really wonderful opportunity when I finished a show called Vice Vertu with the Seven Fingers, which was an immersive show that ran in downtown Montreal for the anniversary of Montreal. And it was about the history of Montreal. And so kind of at the end of that, my husband found an audition notice for a show and a circus. They were looking for a headmaster for a TV show called Big Top Academy.
A headmaster.
And I was like, Chris, I'll never get it. I'm like, I'm bald. I have a super pointy nose. I'm like, I don't look like people look on TV. I'm like, I am made for stage. Right? So I got big eyes. I've got a super expressive face. I move spastically. I was like, this is, I was like, I'll never get it. And so he was like, but basically just to shut him up, I auditioned and then got a call back, and I wasn't cast. I did not get the role of headmaster, but I did get the role of artistic director, which they had kind of written out of the show or anyway, but they brought back in. And so I got this fantastic role on a TV show, which is a co-production with the production company here called Apartment 11 and the Discovery Kids Network, along with Cirque du Soleil. So it's a production of this Montreal company, but with Cirque du Soleil and Discovery Kids, and now it's on Sony. It's on Hulu in the US, and it's a really nice kids show. We did 52 episodes about an imaginary circus school, but it's kind of a magical place where it's, a circus school with a little bit of Harry Potter and some other kind of more magical, fantastical elements.
Oh, cool. Okay, so it's fiction. It's like
it's fiction. It's a drama.
Yeah, it's a drama. There we go. It's not like a documentary or like because I know like there's a ton of documentaries around circus, and there's even been some like, what is it, like celebrity circus, like they try to make it into a competition or whatever.
Yep. This isn't reality TV. It's a drama. It's a scripted drama. And it's great. And the kids, like the writing team was fantastic. The showrunner is incredible. I mean, they really, I think they did a lot with the budgets of the show. And the cool thing is the circus is real. The kids are actors with good movement chops. Some of them had more circus skills than others, but the kids in the show are absolutely ridiculously talented. Not only are they good actors, but they learned a ton of circus for the show. So it was like such an interesting process to learn not only, about just like being on screen. And, I took some quick coaching sessions just to learn about blocking and framing and then just a lot of on set learning for how to do circus. And so the circus in the show was all real. It was, the kids learned their tricks and we as grownups did some circus as well. And so as the process went on, I was able to join the team as a coach for the kids. So as a general circus coach, there were some other really great coaches on the show as well. But then I ended up kind of coming in to do coaching with clown and mime and character. And then by the end, I had written some clown and circus bits for the show. And then I was doing some casting of the circus artists and extras and things. So it ended up just really becoming this. I mean, it was a big production and a big full series. And so I think the first season is out in the US. The 2 seasons are out in Canada. And then we did a pandemic schools out edition. We did that this summer. So we shot a bunch of episodes remotely, which was quite a challenge, but I think they did it really well. And it's a cool, so the cast all came back for that. So,
and what's the name of the show?
It's called Big Top Academy.
Big Top Academy. Very cool. What was the biggest, or what are some of the lessons you learned going from, well, it's such an interesting acting problem because it's like, you're a circus artist and then you have to go to film, but you're a circus artist on film.
Yes, exactly. It's like a bit of a chicken egg
That's
issue
it.
too. Yeah. And so I think the thing was, I think at first it was just I was really it took me a while to really understand about kind of the natural course of takes and how and like when the camera is on you. I think I was quite concerned about like continuity and those kind of things, and I think I felt really stilted. It took me a while to start to feel more
Mhm.
comfortable with where the camera was and just how close and how intimate everything is. So you just, I mean, in general, for circus artists, you just have to be a lot
Yeah.
smaller, which is naturally hard for me. Not, so like, it's like a constant process. I think that I hope I do more film work, but I have a feeling I'm always just going to be like, keep it small, like it's, the things that when you're used to connecting with the guy in the back row, right? It is a very different skill set, but that part is fun. And I also just realized like not every role is right for me. I was really fortunate to get such a fantastic character who just, I could be kind of a quirky, eccentric headmistress of this school, which just gave me a lot of freedom, and it was really, really fun to play. It was a great, great learning experience. And it's also just like, I'm so grateful that I had that. You don't often like transition to becoming an actress in your 40s. Like that's like nobody. It's stupid. Like talk about the world. Like maybe not a very good career plan. But I think that so it is interesting in terms of the other thing I just found really interesting was how to build circus for film,
Hmm.
and I'm really inspired. I really love it. I think it's a great way to share our work as circus artists and reach more people.
It's a really and
It's awesome.
in these times, like, I think that that's what I've observed as the biggest struggle for circus moving forward is adapting to film.
Yep, absolutely. It's hard, and but there's a lot of like different techniques that we can use to do it better and to keep improving. But I think the cool thing is circus artists are pretty. There's a lot of people doing really incredible
Yes.
stuff out there, and in really different levels of connection, right? But it's like how much if you can really learn to treat the screen as small as it is as your audience,
Mhm.
um, it many of the same skills do apply. I mean, definitely blocking and the size of your reactions and just those kind of things. Like the choices you make are a bit different, but those kind of things are it really can. A lot of those things can translate for screen, and circus looks great on film. Circus is it's really interesting. I mean, there's just like all of the issues of the spontaneity of circus and the location of where things end up. It's really tricky for
Mhm.
editing. Um, like a lot of kind of nuts and bolts stuff of making sure the different takes and angles are reflected. That you don't mess up your blocking and stuff, and that's hard. And it's one of I think that's a challenge because just particularly like just give for example sear wheel, like the location of where your wheel is on the ground is going to change from take to take, and it's really hard to make it exactly the
Interesting.
same
Yeah, okay.
and keep that like life in your performance. And so not every shoot can have so many cameras going at the same time, so you're always going to do multiple
Mm,
takes. But they're incredible with editing too, and like cutting into close-ups
yeah.
and that kind of thing. So it's pretty amazing what they
Yeah.
can do. So, but yeah, it's something that I'm really interested in and inspired to do more of. And I think it's just a great way to reach more people with these crazy skills that we as circus artists have developed. Also like particularly with comedy, but also with our more technical acts. I think it's a great way to just make more connection
Yeah, absolutely.
with what we do.
Absolutely. Very cool. Um, and then I wanna ask you about you've created full-length shows before.
Yes.
Prom, yeah?
Yeah, so so with my company, The Radiant, I made 3 full-length shows. So the first one was my one-woman show called The Rendezvous, which was about kind of 1920s heroine who gets stood up for a date and then eventually just starts amusing herself in all these like kind of crazy and insane ways in her own house. And then Cirque Prom is a like kind of a group of misfits who put on a prom, kind of on the theme of the American prom, circus prom. And I just had so much fun writing for that show. And then and collaborating with my cast. It was a really, really great process, really quick, but everybody was like focused. And it was it was a really good example with Cirque Prom of just being like, we had a very short creation, but we got a lot done in a really short period of time because everybody was focused and we were all working towards the same goal. And then my last show with my company is called Eat Sweet Feet, and it's a 3-person show about maternal anxieties and this kind of helicopter mother who's trying to control everything and all the chaos in her life. And her child imagines this troll character, and then she basically turns kind of into this like evil troll mom. So definitely some personal storytelling there as well. Leading to my own anxieties as a parent pretty heavily, but also kind of like fairy tale storytelling. So that was a really fun project.
And how is creating a show different than creating an act? I recognize you could answer that question 1,000 different ways. I guess I'm thinking like creatively, like the process. And it sounds like all 3 shows were also created very differently.
Yeah, those 3 were created very differently. But like I'm in the process of directing a 1-woman show with an incredibly talented contortionist right now. And she is, so we're very, very much in it, but, in the microcosm of each act within a show, we need to just make sure that the emotional arc at the end of each piece satisfies where we need to be within the overall arc of her story. So, it's like really kind of, you don't want it to be too choppy. You don't want it to feel like, I think it's a common mistake. And, I know it's something that I struggled with in the creation of my own show, that it's really easy to just like, if you're a multidisciplinary artist and you've got a bunch of material, it's easy to just be like, okay, I'm just going to put all my acts together. But unfortunately, that doesn't really leave your audience with a very satisfying interdisciplinary experience because, so what you need to do is just kind of take the pressure off. You don't need to tell every single story within that one act. You don't need to kind of fully express yourself for your entire artistic life within the one act. So just kind of, again, learning to take the pressure off of yourself as a performer and being like, in this moment, I just need to be like, up to my wit's end, completely exhausted, and I'm just, cleaning the floor, whatever. Like, like it's
interesting,
kind of, right? It can be this little microcosm of a moment, whereas it does take the pressure off. I think that, when I deal with really, really talented students or up and coming, artists who are becoming professionals, they feel like their act has to say everything about themselves and their career. And like, there's this tendency, you feel like you have to show all your tricks. And the nice thing about within a show, I mean, you're going to have a long connection with your public. You're going to spend maybe an hour with them. Maybe it's a 25-minute show, but maybe it's an hour and 15 minutes. And you're going to, generally solo shows tend to be a bit shorter but some people have 2-hour shows. But you're going to spend this whole time with your audience. And so you also need to understand what it feels like to be an audience member getting to know this performer. And so you have to pace yourself throughout the process of building the work. And so as a director in this kind of sense, it's like, okay, wait, so we're still getting to know you early in the piece. So you don't want to bust out all your hard tricks. You still need to allow for surprise with your public, but you also just need to kind of commit to being like, okay, we're going to spend an hour together. So we have time, we can slow things way down. And you just like that compulsion that so many circus artists have, because they're so like, circus artists work so hard. We're so disciplined, but you just don't need to show everything that you can do all the time. So it's like just kind of like getting people to do less and do less and do less and do less and do less. And once you've settled into you kind of just gone back to like who you are. You have your little problems, you have your moments, and then your big acts can be huge. They can be incredible, but you don't need to be, 150% all the time, because not only is that really hard on your body as a performer, but it's just like for the public too. It's exhausting. I think, with group shows, it's a bit of a different dramaturgy just because you have the energy of having multiple performers, right? So you can kind of balance out a bigger group number, even if it's more somber with like, sort of the calmer moments with one or two artists. So it is a bit of a different vibe. But when you're alone, like that pacing is super, super important, particularly in solo creations. But I think also just like as circus artists, taking the pressure off, like especially if you're looking to have a long career in this business, you're not going to just ever make one act. This isn't the idea that your act needs to be. I mean, I think that the artists who do one act for most of their career are in the minority, and there's a few of them, and they do very, very well, and that's great. But most of the rest of us mortals, we do a bunch of
absolutely, yeah, no, totally.
a ton of things, and so take the pressure off. Not every act needs to tell every single story that you feel the need to share.
This has been incredible, Krin. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, Shannon. It's a pleasure. It was nice to chat with you again. And good luck with the podcast. I think it's a really incredible project that you're doing, and it's important. And I think, anyway, I think it's really great that you're getting people talking about this.
Oh, yay. Thank you. I actually have one more question for you.
Go for it.
What advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your career?
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, I feel like I'm probably going to answer. I would say I need to be a way less hard on myself. Mm-hmm. I was so, God, and I still am. Like, I think we all are. But like I probably won't be able to listen to this podcast because just like it takes me forever to be able to listen to the sound of my own voice.
This is like a psychological thing, though. Like, people hate the sound of their own voice because
I know.
And there's like some scientific reason that like what you hear, the voice that you hear coming out of your mouth is different than what it actually sounds like in the world because of where your voice box is in approximation to like your eardrum or something. I don't actually know what it is, but it's like something like that.
Right. So, but like intellectually along those same lines, I absolutely like in the same way that the voice box is, perceived differently in your brain versus outside, like, what a good metaphor for not letting ourselves be our own worst critics, because the world perceives us differently than we perceive ourselves. And so I think I spent a lot of time being really hard on myself, and I wasted time and choices rather than just like kind of committing to things. But yeah, so, and then at the same time, I'm really proud. I've had this incredible, I've had like this dreamy career, and I'm so, so grateful because so many things have actually gone, like I've done a ton of things right, and I'm like, okay, there's a lot of things that, it's again, just like, it's not about doing the best tricks. It's about being yourself and being like a nice person in this business. Like, I think those kind of things are really, really important. But yes, I think that I have been very hard on myself at certain points in my career, and only to my detriment. So I think that would be my big advice, would be to not be quite so hard on myself. But it's and then what else? I'd probably I'd probably start physio sooner, probably. It's like at this point, I feel like my training is physio, but that's
that's totally normal.
And I think it's like, but I think that kind of like self-care stuff, super important.
Well, Krin, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. I so look forward to having a coffee with you and hanging out and doing stuff once the world is changed.
Me too. Yes. Yeah. And tell your listeners if they listen to this podcast, they can send me the link of my the structured improv concept. I would love to.
Oh yeah, totally. So it's the structured improv
group act solo.
The context is
that's the one I leave.
A group act solo.
That is like, if somebody could please send me a video of that, it would absolutely make sense.
Do you know what I want to do for that? I want to do I want to be a backup dancer in like a chorus line, but I'm the only one. Great. And like maybe I'm like waiting for like the Beyonce or whoever to come on stage, and it's like,
but what a wonderful, that's a great setup.
Yes. I don't know.
Yes, that's a great setup. There you go. Thank you. Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you. That was my interview with Krin Haglund, and I hope y'all loved that nearly as much as I did. I was so inspired talking to Krin for the first and second time. She had all the right things to say in all the right places and really transformed a lot of the way I think about things. I know sometimes I go into the training space, especially in Montreal, it can be a little intimidating. You go in and you're like, oh man, I'm around all these badasses all the time. But to have that mentality and that confidence and that audacity to be like, no, you're going to watch me. I'm going to perform for everyone in this studio. Obviously, we don't have the privilege of doing that right now because there's still a pandemic going on. But someday, when we all get back into studios again, I hope that there are a bunch of performers all over the place doing their thing, doing their skills, and making each other turn around and watch. I just loved that. And the idea of like a studio not being a place where everybody's got their headphones on and they're just doing their PT drills, like over in the corner. Of course, PT drills are important, but like remembering that circus is a performing art and that we celebrate that. Krin is a fantastic director, and if you are a person who is looking to level up especially your comedic chops, I highly recommend Krin. Her website is krinhaglund.com, and she's also on Instagram at Krin Haglund. So get in touch. As for me, for aerial training tips and inspiration, you can follow me on my Instagram account. It is at _artist_athlete. I'm also on TikTok, The Artist Athlete. I'm on Facebook. Patreon.com/TheArtistAthlete is the place to go if you love what you're listening to and want to support every week. And of course, my website, www.theartistathlete.com. Thanks for tuning in, friends, fans, and foes. I'll talk at you next week. The Artist Athlete podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Hi, my name is Noah and I do hand balancing. Hi, my name is Woody and I do Leo walk. Thank you for listening to the Artist Athlete podcast.
Hi, I'm Freya. You can hear my whole story in episode 50 of the Artist Athlete podcast, but I'm here to tell you about something else that I do. I'm a qualified health and nutrition coach. I help people with sleep and body confidence, among other things. You can see everything I have to offer at wildguidance.com or follow me on Instagram at wildguidance.
Hi everyone, I'm Dominique, a ground acrobat, trapeze artist, and coach, currently bringing circus to the extremely cold but very beautiful Northern Ontario, Canada. Circus has changed my life and I'm so grateful to everyone in this community. Find me on Instagram at DomUpsideDown or my website, domupsidedown.com.
Aloha! My name is Beth Russell, and I live on the beautiful island of Maui, Hawaii. I am an aerial artist and movement instructor specializing in chakra yoga to keep me balanced and grounded. I play with silks, trapeze, lyra, rope, acro, aerial yoga and dance, slacklining, pole, bungee, and climbing. Really anything that goes up and allows me to explore 3D space. You can find my dedicated aerial page on Instagram at Maui Aerialist. If you find yourself coming to Maui, let's play.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete podcast, straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space, and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and swing and rope by night. I really, really like the Artist Athlete podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus, and that's why I'm Patreon.
Hello all,
Thank you for tuning in to the Artist Athlete podcast. I am Opal Schwartz from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're ever in the cities, feel free to stop by the Aviary Minneapolis. It's a great time. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and goodbye.
Hey there, artists and athletes. This is Andy Smith, owner and artistic director at Saltaire Circus School in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. And I want to thank you for contributing to the Artist Athlete podcast. If you ever find yourself down in Florida, come check us out. Whether you're an artist, athlete, or someone ordinary just looking to be extraordinary, we have a place for you.